The wind moved softly over the fields, whispering through dry stalks of barley and oat. It was the end of the harvest season, and the land of the northern isles rested beneath a pale, shivering moon. Fires dotted the dark hillsides, glowing like watchful eyes in the distance. The year was old now, its breath shallow, its heart preparing to stop, and soon the turning of time would bring something new, something that felt both ancient and waiting. The people called it Samhain, the day between light and dark, summer and winter, the living and the dead. But no one yet called it Halloween. In a small settlement of timber and stone, the villagers prepared their fires. Smoke curled into the dusk, thick and fragrant with burning herbs. Children ran barefoot over the frost-touched grass, their laughter faint beneath the low moan of the wind. Old women stirred pots of stew and whispered charms to keep evil spirits from finding the doorway. No one truly knew what walked between worlds that night, only that it was best not to be alone. A man named Aemon, broad-shouldered and solemn, tended the largest fire at the village's center. He was keeper of the hearth, chosen for his steady hands and his unshaken heart. Around him, others brought bundles of dry wood, offerings of bread, milk, and berries. They laid them near the flame, murmuring words taught to them by ancestors, whose names had long been lost to time. Aemon's wife, Brigid, watched from their hut's doorway. Her hair was the color of straw in winter, her eyes as gray as morning fog. She carried a small bundle in her arms, a sleeping child wrapped in woven wool. The babe stirred as a gust swept through, the scent of peat and smoke mingling with something colder, sharper, the breath of unseen things. As the fire grew, shadows lengthened and seemed to move with a mind of their own. The villagers gathered close. The old druid, wrapped in furs, lifted his staff and spoke in a tongue older than any of them could recall. The words weren't for the living alone. They were meant for those beyond, those who waited just outside the edge of sight. "This is the thinning," he said softly. "The boundary bends. What was gone may walk again." No one spoke. Even the children, usually restless, were still. They had all heard the stories. How the dead on this night could wander home in search of warmth or memory. How spirits of the forest crept into the world of men, taking the shape of beasts, or worse, of friends long buried. The druid's eyes reflected the fire. "Do not welcome what knocks," he warned. "Do not speak your true name to the dark. And when you leave your fire tonight, leave a flame burning, lest the cold find you first." Then he cast herbs into the blaze, and sparks rose like stars. Later, when the night deepened and the mist rolled low, the young men and women of the village began their procession. They wore masks of carved wood and hollowed gourds, faces of beasts, birds, and forgotten gods. The masks were meant to trick the wandering spirits, to make them believe the living were kin of the other world. Aemon helped his son tie on a crude mask shaped like a wolf. The boy laughed, baring his small teeth through the painted snout. But Brigid felt a tremor in her heart as she watched them disappear into the dark, torches flickering like ghosts along the winding path. The procession wound past the fields, through the standing stones that watched over their ancestors' graves. There, the wind turned strange. It no longer sounded like wind, but like breathing, slow, heavy, patient. The people laid offerings, bread, mead, pieces of meat. They whispered thanks to those who had come before, asking for protection from the winter to come. But one girl, a curious bright-eyed one named Moira, lingered near the stones too long. She thought she saw movement beyond the mist, a flicker of something white between the graves. When she turned her torch toward it, there was nothing. Only fog curling like smoke. Still, she swore she heard a voice whisper her name. In the village, Bridget waited for her husband's return. The babe stirred again, restless in its sleep. A knock came at the door, soft, uncertain. She froze. It came again, 3 times. "Amen?" she whispered. But there was no answer. The fire in the hearth burned low. Shadows crept along the walls like living things. Bridget hesitated, then remembered the druid's words. "Do not welcome what knocks." She stepped back, clutching her child. Through a gap in the timber, she saw something. A shape, too tall for a man, standing just beyond the doorway. It seemed to wear a cloak made of darkness itself, and though the night was windless, its edges rippled like smoke. Bridget whispered a prayer, closed her eyes, and did not move. After a long while, the presence faded. The fire flickered, then steadied again, and outside the village bells began to ring, the signal that the procession was returning. The villagers gathered once more around the great fire. The druid chanted, casting embers into the air. Each spark, he said, was a soul, some of the living, some of the dead, all caught in the turning of the year. One by one, the people spoke the names of those they'd lost. Aemon spoke his father's. Bridget whispered her sister's. Moira whispered none, only watched the flames and listened to the voice she thought she'd heard among the stones. Then the wind shifted. The fire bent low, almost extinguished, before roaring high again in blue and white light. And there, for an instant, the villagers swore they saw them, the departed faces in the fire, faint but real, smiling or weeping, or simply watching. The druid lowered his staff. "They are with us," he said softly, "and now we must let them go." The villagers bowed their heads. The moment passed. The fire burned steady and red once more. As the feast began, the tension eased. Bread and meat were shared. Songs rose quietly into the star-heavy sky. Children dozed by the fire, their masks discarded, while the elders told stories of winters past, of wolves and hunger, and ghosts who once guarded their fields. Aemon sat beside Bridget and the child, his arm around them both. "You look pale," he said. She nodded slowly. "Someone came to the door." "Who?" he asked. She hesitated. "I don't know." Aemon frowned, glancing toward the path. No one should wander alone tonight. They stayed close after that, the warmth of the fire between them and the dark. Yet far off, beyond the circle of light, something watched. The night was long, and even as laughter rose, there were moments when the whole village seemed to hold its breath. At last dawn touched the edge of the horizon, a faint gray bloom over the hills. The fires burned low, reduced to glowing embers. The people stirred from sleep, their faces soft with weariness. The druid stood once more, staff in hand. "The veil is closed," he said. "The old year has died. The new one begins." He took a coal from the sacred fire and placed it in a clay bowl. Each family came forward to light their own hearth from it, carrying the flame home. It was a promise, the warmth of life shared among them all. Bridget followed last, her child still in her arms. The morning was cold and clear. The fields shimmered with frost, and the air smelled of peat and smoke and something sweetly strange. She thought she heard faint laughter, distant and familiar, like her sister's voice on the wind. And then it was gone. The years turned, as years do. The people aged, the children grew, and the old stories became softer around the edges. The fires of Samhain continued, though each generation forgot a little more of the words, the meanings, the reasons. But still they lit candles in hollowed turnips. Still they wore masks to hide from spirits. Still they told tales of the night when the dead could cross into the world of the living. Centuries later, in distant lands, when languages had changed and empires had risen and fallen, the memory of Samhain took a new name. All Hallows' Eve, then Halloween. And though few remembered the ancient prayers or the faces in the fire, something of that first night still lived in the air. The hush before midnight, the cold at the back of the neck, the sense that somewhere, just beyond the edge of sight, the veil might once again be thin. Long after the villagers were gone, after even their names had turned to dust, the stones still stood on the hill. Every autumn, when the nights grew cold and the moon was high, a faint light would sometimes flicker among them. Travelers swore they saw figures moving there, shadows that danced without sound. Some said it was the ghosts of those first celebrants, keeping their ancient promise to guard the fire between worlds. Others said it was the wind, and nothing more. But on rare nights, if one listened closely, it was said you could still hear the druid's voice carried on the breeze. The year dies, and is born again. The fire fades, and yet it burns. The dead sleep, and yet they walk. Remember, the story of the first Halloween is not one of horror, but of memory. It began not with monsters or mischief, but with people trying to understand the dark. People who feared the coming cold and hoped that, in lighting their fires, they could warm more than just their hands. They could warm their souls. And though the world changed, though centuries would cover their customs in masks, laughter, and pumpkin light, the heart of that night remained the same. A flicker of flame against the endless dark, a moment when the living and the dead shared the same breath. That was the first Halloween, not a holiday of fear, but of remembrance, not of death, but of return. And somewhere, under the oldest stars, a faint fire still burns, waiting for the turning of the year, waiting for the night when the veil grows thin once more. The legend of the Headless Horseman. Asleep to the stories of the world narration. The night air is cool and still. Leaves rustle faintly on the edge of a quiet New York valley. A crescent moon hangs low, glimmering off the mist that curls along the Hudson River. And somewhere beyond that fog, beneath the boughs of ancient elm and oak, the tale of the Headless Horseman begins. It is said that every legend begins with a truth, and that every truth, in time, becomes a story. Tonight we drift through both, through the world of history and the world of whispers. The Valley of Shadows. 2 centuries ago, there stood a small village tucked between rolling hills and forests thick with maples and ash trees. The people who lived there called it Sleepy Hollow. It was a Dutch settlement, quiet and old-fashioned even for its time. The settlers spoke softly, moved slowly, and held deep respect for the unseen world, the spirits, omens, and mysteries that seemed to drift through the morning fog. Sleepy Hollow was known for its stillness. Travelers claimed that time itself seemed to move more slowly there, as though the valley were caught between this world and the next. Children were warned not to wander too far from the lanterns after dark. The locals whispered of strange sounds, hooves echoing on roads long after midnight, even when no rider could be found. and at the center of all those whispers rode a figure feared by all. A rider said to wear the uniform of a Hessian soldier, a ghost who had lost his head to a cannonball in some forgotten skirmish of the Revolutionary War. Each year, they said, he returned on horseback, galloping through the woods in search of his lost head. A war's echo. To understand the ghost, one must understand the war that gave him birth. In the 1770s, when the colonies were still young and England ruled from afar, soldiers were hired from across Europe to fight. Among them were the Hessians, German mercenaries sent to aid the British Army. They were fierce, disciplined, and feared. They wore dark green coats, gleaming buttons, and tall helmets adorned with brass. It was during one of those violent clashes along the Hudson, the Battle of White Plains, some said, that a Hessian cavalryman met his end. He was struck by a cannonball, his head torn from his body, and his comrades hurriedly buried him in the churchyard of Sleepy Hollow. But, as legend told it, his spirit could not rest. When the mists rolled in and the moon was thin, the villagers swore they could hear his horse's hooves pounding the earth. And if you walk the old road by the church after midnight, you might see a dark figure riding hard through the fog, headless, his cape whipping in the night wind, searching, forever searching for what he had lost. The storyteller and the schoolmaster. Decades later, in the early 1800s, a writer named Washington Irving visited those same valleys. He was a man of imagination, charm, and melancholy, and he collected stories the way others collected coins or rare stones. When he heard the tale of the headless rider, he saw in it something both eerie and human. He wrote it down, weaving it into the legend of Sleepy Hollow. In his telling, the ghostly rider haunted the life of Ichabod Crane, a lanky schoolteacher from Connecticut. Ichabod was a dreamer, tall and awkward, yet curious and kind. He loved food, stories, and superstition. He would stay late after lessons, reading about witches and spirits by candlelight, and then walk home trembling through the dark woods, afraid of every rustling leaf. One autumn night, after a party at the Van Tassel home, a grand house full of laughter, cider, and music, Ichabod rode home through the winding forest path known as Sleepy Hollow Lane. The moon was pale, and the woods were silent. Then came the sound, soft at first, then stronger, the clop, clop, clop of a horse behind him. He turned. A massive black steed thundered down the road, and upon it, a rider cloaked in shadow. Where a head should be, there was none. In its place, a jack-o'-lantern glowed faintly, cradled in the ghost's arm. The chase through the hollow. Ichabod spurred his horse desperately forward. The wind howled through the trees as the two raced through the night, teacher and phantom, life and death, flesh and spirit. They reached the old wooden bridge near the churchyard, for local lore claimed the ghost could not cross consecrated ground. Ichabod looked back once more. The horseman rose at his saddle and hurled his flaming pumpkin straight at Ichabod's head. There was a crash, a scream, and then silence. When the sun rose the next morning, Ichabod Crane was gone. Only his hat and a shattered pumpkin lay beside the bridge. Some said he fled the hollow in terror and never returned. Others swore the headless horseman had claimed him, and in that uncertainty, the legend grew. The power of story. Washington Irving's tale spread across the world, but Sleepy Hollow itself was real, a real village, a real churchyard, real mist curling along the Hudson. The people there believed the story because they could feel it. They had heard hoofbeats echo through the night. They had seen shadows where no man should stand. They had lived through a war where thousands of men never came home. And if ghosts rode anywhere, surely they rode there. In truth, Irving's headless horseman was not just a ghost. He was a symbol of the old world clashing with the new, of superstition colliding with reason, of how fear lingers even when peace has been declared. Older than America, but the Headless Horseman is far older than America. Long before Sleepy Hollow, the Irish told of the Dullahan, a dark rider who carried his own head beneath one arm. Wherever he stopped, death soon followed. No gate or lock could keep him out. The moment his horse's hooves struck the ground, the doomed soul's time had come. In Germany, there were tales of headless riders cursed for their sins, huntsmen who killed on sacred ground, and soldiers who desecrated churches. They rode forever, unable to find peace, condemned to wander the living world until forgiven. And in Scotland, some said a spirit without a head haunted the battlefields, galloping through the smoke after the clans had fallen, calling out for those who had forgotten their honor. Perhaps when Washington Irving wrote his story, these older ghosts whispered in his ear, between fact and fear. Historians today tell us there was, indeed, a Hessian soldier decapitated near Sleepy Hollow during the Revolution. His name has been lost, but local records speak of graves for foreign soldiers in that churchyard. One of them may have sparked the legend. But as years passed, memory blurred into myth. The villagers saw shapes in the fog and believed. Mothers hushed their children with the story, and fathers walking home from the tavern quickened their pace past the church. Fear, after all, is a kind of belief, and belief gives birth to ghosts. The Eternal Ride. Each Halloween, the legend returns. Visitors to Sleepy Hollow line the streets, watching as men on black horses gallop through the mist in costume. Pumpkins glow in windows. The old church bells toll midnight, and for one moment the line between past and present blurs. In that breath of darkness, one can almost imagine hooves pounding on the old road, a rider without a head, galloping through time, forever bound to the valley that remembers him. Whether ghost, memory, or myth, the Headless Horseman still rides. Reflections in the fog. The story endures because it touches something deep in the human heart. It reminds us of the wars we've fought, the things we've lost, and the way fear travels down generations, like an echo in the night. Perhaps we are all haunted, not by ghosts, but by the stories we tell to make sense of what we cannot see. And so, when the moon is high and the air smells of leaves and smoke, the legend stirs again. A whisper through the branches, a glimmer of motion in the fog, the sound of a distant horse galloping just beyond sight. Sleep now, traveler. The Headless Horseman will not harm you tonight. He rides only where fear and memory meet, on the quiet roads between this world and the next. And if you listen closely as you drift toward dreams, you might still hear the echo of his ride, the steady rhythm of hooves fading into the hollow's endless mist. Sleep to the stories of the world, the great pyramids of Giza. The night over Giza is silent, but not empty. A dry breeze drifts across the endless sands of the Egyptian plateau. Beneath the moon's soft glow, 3 great shapes rise from the desert floor, ancient and solemn, as if the earth itself decided to reach toward the heavens. These are the great pyramids of Giza, Khufu, Khafra, and Menkaure, the last surviving wonders of the ancient world. Thousands of years have passed since the first stone was laid, yet their outlines remain nearly perfect, defying time, wind, and human ambition. To lie beneath the shadow of these monuments is to feel the heartbeat of history itself, steady, patient, eternal. The story of the Great Pyramids begins more than 4,500 years ago, during the Old Kingdom of ancient Egypt, a time of prosperity, faith, and ambition. The land was ruled by the pharaohs, kings believed to be divine, living gods upon the earth. Among them was Khufu, or Cheops, as the Greeks called him. He ruled Egypt during the 4th dynasty, around 2550 BCE, and it was his vision that would give birth to the largest of all pyramids. Khufu desired more than a tomb. He wanted a stairway to the heavens, a monument that would outlast the centuries and carry his soul into the eternal afterlife. The Egyptians believed that death was not an end, but a passage, a journey from the world of men into the realm of the gods. The pyramid, in its perfect geometry, represented that sacred journey, the earthly base symbolizing the physical world, and the pointed apex rising toward the sun, God Ra. To build such a monument required an empire's strength. Tens of thousands of workers, craftsmen, masons, engineers, and farmers, during the flood season, labored under the desert sun. Contrary to old myths, these were not slaves but skilled laborers organized into rotating teams. They were housed in nearby workers' villages, fed with bread, onions, and beer, and buried with honor when they died. Archaeological discoveries have revealed tools, bakeries, and even the remains of oxen, showing the massive logistics behind the construction. Each limestone block, weighing several tons, was quarried nearby. The core stones were rough, while the outer casing stones, once polished white, gleamed like mirrors beneath the sun. The sight must have been blinding, a mountain of light reflecting across the Nile Valley. The methods of construction have long been debated. Some believe ramps were built, spiraling or sloping from the ground up. Others suggest counterweight systems using wooden sleds, water, and levers. What remains certain is that these ancient engineers possessed a mathematical precision unmatched for centuries. The Great Pyramid of Khufu was aligned almost perfectly with the cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west, within a fraction of a degree. Inside, a labyrinth of corridors and chambers awaited the pharaoh's soul. The king's chamber, built from red granite brought from Aswan hundreds of miles away, held the royal sarcophagus. Narrow shafts pointed toward the stars, aligning with constellations sacred to the Egyptians, perhaps to guide Khufu's spirit toward Orion, associated with Osiris, god of the afterlife. When Khufu's son Khafre came to power, he sought to match his father's glory. His pyramid stands beside Khufu's, slightly smaller but built on higher ground, creating the illusion of equal height. To guard his complex, Khafre commissioned a colossal sculpture, the Great Sphinx. Carved directly from limestone, the Sphinx combines the body of a lion with the head of a man, likely Khafre himself. Its gaze has remained fixed eastward for millennia, watching the sunrise each day over the desert horizon. Menkaure, Khafre's successor, built the third and smallest of the three pyramids. Though modest in scale, his monument reflects refinement, granite casing, intricate temples, and polished craftsmanship. Together, the three pyramids form a celestial triangle, their placement thought to mirror the stars of Orion's belt. As the centuries passed, the golden age of pyramid building faded. The cost of such grand projects, combined with changing religious beliefs, shifted focus toward the Valley of the Kings. There, pharaohs like Tutankhamun would rest in hidden tombs, safe from robbers and time. Yet none could capture the same majesty as the pyramids of Giza. Over millennia, the pyramids endured invasions, earthquakes, and erosion. The gleaming outer stones were stripped away to build Cairo's mosques and palaces, leaving the rough core we see today. Still, the structure remains remarkably intact, a testimony to the genius of its builders. The Greeks and Romans who visited Giza were awed by what they saw. Historians like Herodotus recorded tales of hundreds of thousands of men working for decades, of secret chambers and hidden treasures. Poets wrote of the pyramids as eternal mountains, defying both man and nature. In modern times, explorers and archaeologists sought to unlock the mysteries within. In the 19th century, British and French expeditions mapped the internal passages, measuring every chamber and tunnel. Later, in the 20th and 21st centuries, advanced technologies, infrared scanning, muon imaging, and 3D modeling, revealed hidden voids and possible secret chambers still unexplored. Today, the Great Pyramids of Giza stand as the last of the 7 wonders of the ancient world still standing. They attract millions of visitors each year, drawn by a mixture of reverence and curiosity. Scientists continue to study them, while tourists stand in silence beneath their towering presence, feeling the same awe that travelers felt thousands of years ago. The sun rises over the desert plateau, casting long golden shadows. Camels move slowly along the horizon. The air is dry and still, carrying whispers of a civilization that believed in eternity. Every grain of sand, every carved block speaks of human ambition, of a people who looked to the sky and built monuments to meet it. As the day fades into twilight, the pyramids glow with a quiet light, their sharp lines softened by centuries of wind. The stars emerge above them, the same constellations the ancient Egyptians once watched. In that stillness, the Great Pyramids remind us that history is not lost. It sleeps beneath the sands, waiting to be remembered. The Great Pyramids of Giza stand as both mystery and message. They tell us that no empire, no matter how vast, is eternal. But the desire to reach for something greater, to carve meaning into stone and time, is what truly endures. And as the desert wind hums softly across their weathered faces, the pyramids continue their vigil, guardians of the past, witnesses to the present, and monuments to the eternal dream of humankind. The desert of Giza stretches endlessly beneath the Egyptian sun, a sea of gold and silence. The wind carries whispers of an ancient world, a time when kings were gods, and stone was shaped not just by hands, but by faith itself. It is here, on this sacred plateau, that the Great Pyramids stand. Khufu, Khafra, and Menkaure, 3 eternal sentinels keeping watch over the ages. To walk among them is to walk through time. The air is dry, the horizon infinite, and beneath your feet lie the stories of thousands who once toiled under the same sky. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, the largest of them all, was built over 4,500 years ago, yet its stones remain tight and true. It rises more than 480 feet high, once gleaming with smooth white limestone that reflected the sunlight like a beacon. Khufu, known to the Greeks as Cheops, ruled during Egypt's 4th dynasty. He was not merely a king. He was seen as a living god, the earthly manifestation of divine order. His pyramid was meant to be his gateway to the heavens, ensuring his immortality among the stars. The Egyptians believed that when the pharaoh died, his soul, called the Ka, continued its journey into eternity. The pyramid served as both tomb and vessel, a stairway to the afterlife. The scale of the construction remains one of the greatest achievements in human history. Scholars estimate that more than 2 million limestone and granite blocks were used. Some weighed as much as 80 tons. Each one was shaped, transported, and placed with mathematical precision. The exact method remains debated. Straight ramps, spiral ramps, water-lubricated sleds. Yet, whatever the truth, it speaks of a civilization whose engineering genius still humbles the modern world. For centuries, myths suggested that the pyramids were built by slaves. But excavations in the 20th century changed that belief forever. Near the pyramids, archaeologists uncovered workers' villages, bakeries, breweries, and graves of the very people who built them. They were skilled artisans, organized laborers, and loyal Egyptians who believed they were serving their god-king. Their graffiti, carved into hidden stones, even contained team names like the Drunkards of Menkaure, a reminder that the human spirit was alive even amidst monumental labor. The workers' lives revolved around the rhythms of the Nile. When the great river flooded each year, farming ceased, and men from across the kingdom came to Giza to build. In return, they were fed, housed, and honored. Archaeological findings show they were nourished with bread, beer, and meat, rare luxuries for most Egyptians. The laborers worked in rotating crews, carving, dragging, and setting each block with precision that would last through eternity. The Great Pyramid's internal design is as mysterious as its exterior grandeur. Narrow corridors lead upward into the king's chamber, where Khufu's red granite sarcophagus still rests, though the treasures it once held are long gone. Above the chamber, massive granite beams relieve pressure from the stones above, a feat of engineering brilliance. Small air shafts point toward key stars in Orion and the North Pole, connecting the pharaoh's resting place to the heavens. Beside Khufu's monument stands the pyramid of his son, Khafre. Slightly smaller, but built on higher ground, it appears almost equal in height, a symbol of filial reverence and divine rivalry. Khafre's pyramid is guarded by one of Egypt's most iconic symbols, the Great Sphinx. Carved from a single limestone ridge, it combines the body of a lion, representing power, with the head of a man, likely Khafre himself. For thousands of years it has faced the rising sun, a silent guardian of the necropolis. The third pyramid, that of Menkaure, completes the sacred triad. Although smaller, it stands out for its elegant craftsmanship. Its lower casing was made from red granite, giving it a distinctive hue. Each pyramid was part of a larger complex, temples, causeways, and subsidiary pyramids, all meticulously aligned with cosmic and earthly principles. Together, they reflected Egypt's belief in balance, order, and eternity. As centuries passed, the white limestone casing stones were stripped away, used to build Cairo's mosques and palaces. What remains today are the rough inner cores, weathered yet still magnificent. Earthquakes, sandstorms, and time have eroded their surfaces, but not their spirit. They continue to command respect, standing as monuments to endurance itself. For the ancient Egyptians, the pyramids were not mere tombs. They were living symbols of creation. Their shape mirrored the primordial mound that rose from chaos at the dawn of time, according to Egyptian mythology. The pyramid's apex represented the sun's rays, a bridge between heaven and earth. Even the very word for pyramid, Mer, meant place of ascension. The Giza Plateau was carefully chosen. Its bedrock was solid, its location west of the Nile symbolic, for the west was the land of the dead, where the sun set each evening. Across the river lay the living world, bustling with farms, temples, and markets. Every night, as darkness fell over Giza, the Egyptians believed the pharaoh's soul sailed with Ra across the underworld, to be reborn with the sunrise. For centuries after the Old Kingdom, the pyramids stood as silent witnesses to Egypt's changing fate. Dynasties rose and fell, yet the pyramids endured. When foreign conquerors arrived, Persians, Greeks, Romans, they too marveled at these structures. The Greek historian Herodotus wrote of them with awe, describing Khufu as a tyrant who forced hundreds of thousands to labor for decades. Though his tales were exaggerated, they cemented the pyramid's place in legend. Medieval travelers spun their own stories that the pyramids held magical texts, hidden treasures, or even the wisdom of Atlantis. Some believed they were storehouses for the world's knowledge, preserved from the Great Flood. Even today, theories abound: secret chambers, energy alignments, alien architects. The truth, though simpler, is no less wondrous. These were the works of human devotion, mathematics, and vision, driven by faith in eternity. In the modern era, archaeologists have peeled back the sands of time. In the 1800s, explorers like Giovanni Belzoni and Colonel Weiss ventured inside, mapping corridors by torchlight. In the 20th century, modern Egyptologists like Zahi Hawass uncovered new tombs of workers, overseers, and priests, painting a fuller picture of the pyramid's world. More recently, infrared scans and muon imaging revealed hidden voids within Khufu's pyramid, possibly new chambers still unexplored. Beyond their mystery, the pyramids tell the story of humanity's greatest ambition: to leave something behind that defies death. They remind us that civilizations rise not only on conquest, but on imagination, on the belief that stone and spirit can merge to touch the eternal. As dusk falls over the plateau, the sky deepens from gold to indigo. The last light glints off the worn edges of the pyramids. In that stillness, one can almost hear the echo of ancient chants, the thud of stone, the rhythm of the Nile. Camels rest near the dunes, and the modern city of Cairo hums faintly in the distance. Yet within this vast silence, time feels suspended. The Great Pyramids of Giza are not just relics. They are conversations between past and present, between the hands that built them and the eyes that behold them now. They teach us that greatness is not measured by power or wealth, but by endurance, by vision, by the human will to create something timeless. And as the stars rise above the desert, aligning once more with Orion and Sirius, the pyramids stand in quiet harmony, the pulse of eternity still beating beneath the sands. Sleep to the stories of the world, the mysteries of crop circles. The night is quiet over the countryside. The moon hangs low above a sea of wheat and barley, its light spilling like silver across the rolling hills. There is no movement, no sound, only the soft whisper of wind and the rhythm of insects in the dark. Then, from the corner of your eye, a shimmer. You stop the car, step out, and there it is. A perfect circle carved into the field, glowing faintly in the moonlight. The stalks are laid down, not broken. Their pattern radiates outward in gentle curves. It feels impossibly deliberate, and yet no one is there. This is where our story begins, in the quiet heart of a mystery that has spanned centuries. The mystery of the crop circles. Long before talk of flying saucers or hoaxes, stories of strange shapes in the fields already existed. In 1678, a pamphlet was printed in Hertfordshire, England. It was called The Mowing Devil. It told of a farmer who refused to pay a man to harvest his oats, saying he'd rather the devil do it. That night, his field appeared to burn with blue fire, and by dawn the stalks were perfectly cut in a circular pattern. People said the devil had done his work well. Even in those early times, circles in crops stirred fear, fascination, and awe. In 1880, a scientist named John Rand Capron wrote to Nature magazine about rings of flattened crops. He believed they were caused by whirlwinds, sudden gusts of air pressing the stalks flat. And in 1932, an archaeologist described a similar formation in Sussex. It was simple but perfect. No footsteps, no tracks, just silence and form. And then, centuries later, the circles returned. In the 1960s, far from England, in the swamps of northern Australia, a farmer rose before dawn and saw a silver disc lift off from the reeds. In the water below, a circle of pressed plants remained. It became known as the Tully saucer nest. Some said it was a sign from above. Others called it a coincidence of wind and water. But whatever it was, it marked the beginning of something new. By the 1970s, the circles began appearing in England again, small at first, lonely rings in fields of barley and wheat. No one saw them being made, yet they appeared overnight. At first there were just a few, then dozens, then hundreds. The newspapers noticed. Television crews came. Farmers scratched their heads, while tourists drove for miles just to see the strange patterns for themselves. They called them crop circles. Through the 1980s, they grew more complex. Not just single circles now, but clusters of them, sometimes overlapping, sometimes forming elegant designs. People began to wonder if the circles were messages, signs left by visitors from the sky. Books were written. Theories spread. Researchers like Colin Andrews began documenting them, trying to find meaning in their geometry. Were they star maps? Energy fields? Or something even more mysterious? And then, in 1991, came the confession that changed everything. Two Englishmen, Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley, stepped forward. They said they had made many of the circles themselves, using nothing more than wooden planks, string, and careful measurement. They demonstrated it for reporters, and overnight made another circle before the cameras. It looked perfect. They laughed and said it had all been a joke. Many sighed with relief. The mystery, they thought, was solved. But soon something odd happened. The circles didn't stop. They became bigger, more detailed, more mathematical, and even more mysterious. Some formed shapes that echoed fractals, repeating patterns found in nature. Others resembled solar systems, spirals, or messages written in some unknown language. Mathematicians pointed out golden. Ratios and Fibonacci sequences in the designs. Astronomers noted that many aligned with the solstice sunrise. Skeptics insisted it was still human art, only now made by teams using lasers, GPS, and night vision. Believers said the perfection was too great, that no one could do this in a single night without lights, sound, or mistakes. And so the debate deepened. Scientists began to study the crops themselves. They found that in some circles, stalks were bent at the nodes, not broken. Some showed signs of heat exposure, as if microwaves had softened them. Others found no such evidence at all. New theories emerged. Perhaps invisible vortices of air, mini-tornadoes, pressed the crops down. Perhaps electromagnetic pulses struck from above. Perhaps these were Earth's own energy lines made visible. Or perhaps, as some quietly suggested, we were witnessing communication from beyond. Then came the year 2001, and with it, one of the most extraordinary formations ever seen. Near the Chilbolton Observatory in England, a formation appeared that resembled a face, and beside it, a pattern strikingly similar to the famous Arecibo radio message humanity had sent into space in 1974. It seemed to depict a DNA helix, a solar system, and a figure not quite human. Was it an answer, a prank, or a mirror, reflecting our wish to not be alone? Other formations appeared that summer, one shaped like a three-dimensional cube, another like a Julia fractal set, formed with hundreds of perfect circles. Some were made by known artists. Others appeared mysteriously, with no claim of authorship. The world began to treat them as art, but also as sacred. Visitors walked through them quietly, as though entering temples. Even skeptics felt the hush of wonder standing among the flattened wheat. And through it all, the question remained, if humans make them, why? Why choose to spend long nights in silence, creating perfect circles that vanish by dawn? Why choose anonymity when fame waits on the other side? Perhaps the circle makers, whoever they are, understand something deeper, that mystery itself is a kind of beauty. Today, crop circles appear not only in England, but across the world. In the rice paddies of Japan, the meadows of Canada, the sunflower fields of France, and the deserts of Nevada. Some are confirmed art projects. Others appear without explanation. All of them carry that same quiet power, geometry written on the Earth's skin. Scientists say all can be explained by human tools. Artists call them expressions of peace. Believers call them messages. But maybe they are something else entirely. Reminders that the unknown still exists, and that wonder has not left the world. Because in truth, the mystery of the crop circles may not lie in how they are made, but why we look for meaning in them. We are a species that yearns for connection to the stars, to the earth, to something larger than ourselves. We carve patterns into fields, draw symbols in the sand, and send our voices into space, hoping someone will hear. Maybe when we see those spirals in the wheat, what we're really seeing is our own reflection, the mark of human curiosity and imagination, looping endlessly through time. And as the wind sighs across the field, and the stalks ripple like water beneath the moon, we remember that even the simplest circle, drawn in silence, fading by morning, can make the world feel vast and full of mystery once more. So tonight, as you drift to sleep, imagine yourself standing at the edge of that moonlit field. The air is cool, the world is still, and somewhere in the distance, the land itself is whispering its secrets, ancient, beautiful, and forever unexplained. The night is calm in New Haven, Connecticut. It is the year 1839. A faint rain whispers on the rooftops, and a newborn cries in a grand home filled with fine lace and polished wood. Her name is Sarah Lockwood Pardee, and no one yet knows that her life will one day be woven into one of the strangest tales in American history. Sarah was born into comfort. Her father, Leonard Pardee, was a skilled craftsman and inventor, a man who built carriages and believed in the new industrial age. Her mother, Sarah Burns, was graceful and intelligent, ensuring her children received the finest education possible. Even as a child, Sarah was different. She spoke softly, but quickly learned things most children could not. By her teens, she could read Latin, translate French literature, and play piano so beautifully that guests sometimes forgot to breathe. Neighbors called her the Belle of New Haven. Some said her eyes carried both kindness and melancholy, as if she already understood how fragile life could be. When she was 23, the young and intelligent Sarah Pardee met William Wirt Winchester, heir to the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. Their marriage in 1862 joined two powerful names, Pardee and Winchester, at the height of the American industrial boom. The Winchester rifle was known as the gun that won the West. It was efficient, deadly, and lucrative. Every bullet fired, every rifle sold, echoed coins into the Winchester fortune. But where others saw success, Sarah began to sense something else, a weight beneath the gold. For a time, life was blissful. The couple lived in a fine home in New Haven, surrounded by gardens and laughter. In 1866, they welcomed their first and only child, Annie Pardee Winchester. But happiness proved fleeting. Within 6 weeks, baby Annie fell ill with marasmus, a rare condition where the body fails to absorb nutrients. Sarah watched helplessly as her newborn faded, too weak even to cry. On July 25, 1866, Annie died in her mother's arms. That single loss broke something deep inside her. William tried to comfort her, but grief changes a person's soul in quiet ways. For years, Sarah wore black and rarely spoke above a whisper. The sound of her piano, once bright and hopeful, grew slow and sorrowful, minor keys drifting through long, empty rooms. And then, in 1881, tragedy struck again. Her husband, William, fell ill with tuberculosis. He died at just 43 years old, leaving Sarah a widow, alone, childless, and unimaginably wealthy. In a single moment, she inherited over $20 million, along with a 50% stake in the Winchester Company. That's nearly $500 million today. Yet, for Sarah, the fortune felt cursed, built upon the lives ended by the rifle that bore her husband's name. The late 19th century was an age of superstition and spiritualism. Mediums, seances, and ghostly photographs filled newspaper pages. People wanted to believe that death was not the end, that loved ones still lingered somewhere close, whispering through candlelight and table wraps. Sarah Winchester, now a widow at 42, found herself drawn into this world. In her sorrow, she sought meaning. According to legend, she visited a Boston medium known for her powerful trances. The medium, speaking with eerie calm, told her, "The spirits of those slain by the Winchester rifle cry out for you. They seek rest, and you must build them a home, a place where they can wander in peace. If you continue to build, you will live. If you ever stop, you will join them." The message pierced Sarah like an arrow. Whether it was truth, madness, or grief, something inside her shifted. Not long after, she packed her belongings, left New Haven, and boarded a train west, far from the memories, far from the graves, toward a place where she could begin again. The journey took her to California's Santa Clara Valley, a land of rolling orchards and golden hills. In 1884, she purchased an 8-room farmhouse from a local doctor. And there, at the edge of what would become San Jose, Sarah Winchester began to build. At first, the work was modest: repairs, expansions, porches. But the construction soon became endless. Carpenters worked day and night, their hammers echoing even through moonlit hours. Staircases spiraled to nowhere. Doors opened to solid walls. Windows looked into other rooms. Hallways looped like dreams. Locals began to whisper. They said the widow was haunted, and that she built structures to confuse the ghosts who followed her. Others said she built because she could not bear silence, that the constant sound of saws and nails drowned out her grief. Sarah herself never offered an explanation. She rarely spoke to reporters and forbade photography. Workers were hired, dismissed, and rehired again. Plans were drawn, changed, and redrawn in endless variations. As the years passed, the modest farmhouse grew into a 7-story labyrinth with hundreds of rooms, towers, and secret passages. Its walls held not only nails and wood, but also the restless energy of Sarah's sleepless mind. Some say she consulted spirits each night in her seance room, asking them what to build next. Whether this is myth or truth remains unknown. But what is certain is that she lived by one rule: never stop building. Even as she aged, she walked the halls with lantern in hand, wrapped in black, her small frame moving silently through the maze she created. The mansion became her world, a living organism of wood and glass, shifting and expanding as she searched for peace she could never quite reach. The sound of hammers never faded. By day, the air around the valley shimmered with the rhythmic clang of metal on wood. By night, lanterns glowed behind curtained windows as the carpenters worked under Sarah's quiet supervision. They said she rarely slept, walking the halls with a notebook in hand, sketching new corridors in pencil and candlelight. The Winchester mansion was no ordinary home. It grew like a vine, twisting in every direction, forward, sideways, upward, and downward. Every time Sarah felt the whisper of stillness, she ordered something new to begin. A stairway that rose 7 steps before dropping 5. A doorway that opened to a sheer drop into the garden. A window set in the floor. Walls with hidden cupboards, rooms behind rooms, and an elevator powered by water pressure from the hills. The workers didn't question her. They were paid generously, 3 times the normal rate, and they said she was kind, polite but distant, her blue eyes calm and unreadable. Meals were delivered to different rooms, for Sarah rarely dined in the same place twice. Each night, a bell would ring at midnight. The household paused. It was said she entered a small chamber deep within the house, her seance room, lit by candles and mirrors. There she would commune with unseen guests, asking them what to build next. At 2 a.m., the bell would ring again, and the house returned to silence. Whether these stories are true, no one can say. But the effect was undeniable. The mansion never ceased to grow. By the turn of the century, it had over 100 rooms, 2,000 doors, and 10,000 windows. A grand staircase wound endlessly upward, built with shallow steps so the aging Sarah could ascend without strain. Stained glass windows gleamed with cryptic designs, spiderwebs, suns, and the number 13, which she seemed to favor for reasons only she knew. And yet, amid the oddities, there was beauty. Hand-carved balustrades, Tiffany glass that caught morning light like liquid gold, and gardens filled with cypress and roses. Sarah wasn't merely eccentric. She was an artist. She saw the house not as a fortress of fear, but as a canvas, a space that breathed her sorrow, her guilt, and her hope of forgiveness. Sometimes, when workers rested in the garden, they swore they heard music drifting through open windows, soft piano melodies played by unseen hands. Others claimed to hear footsteps in empty halls, or the rustle of a skirt turning a corner that led nowhere. But Sarah walked among these stories quietly. If ghosts lived in her house, she seemed to accept them as companions rather than terrors. Her wealth allowed her solitude. She donated generously to hospitals, churches, and orphanages, though she demanded no recognition. When townsfolk saw her carriage in San Jose, they often bowed or waved politely, and she returned the gesture with a faint nod. To most, she was simply the widow Winchester, mysterious, reclusive, yet not unkind. Years blurred together like the corridors of her mansion. Time seemed to loop, just as her stairways did. She never stopped building. Even when earthquakes shook the earth, she ordered repairs before the dust had settled. To her, stillness was death, and movement was life. The earthquake of 1906 came without warning. In the early hours before dawn, the ground beneath San Jose convulsed. Walls cracked, towers groaned, and the mighty Winchester house shuddered like a living thing. Sarah was in bed when the quake struck, Windows burst inward, and furniture toppled around her. As the rumbling grew, chimneys collapsed, and entire sections of the mansion crumbled into ruin. When the shaking finally ceased, the house had been cut nearly in half. The upper floors were destroyed. Dust and silence filled the air like fog. The servants rushed to find her. They discovered her trapped in her bedroom, pinned behind a heavy door warped by the quake. She was shaken, but alive. When they pried the door open, Sarah stood calm in the debris, holding a single candle. After the disaster, she ordered much of the damaged structure to be sealed off. The 7-story towers were never rebuilt. She reduced the height to 4 stories, fearing the weight of heaven itself might again come crashing down. Still, she resumed construction. Piece by piece, the mansion healed, or perhaps transformed. Some walls were left unfinished. Others were repaired with even stranger designs. She had a door installed that opened directly into open air, 30 feet above the garden. A staircase twisted upon itself like a corkscrew. It was as if the earthquake had changed her dialogue with the spirits, and the new rooms were her attempt to respond. Visitors came rarely. When they did, they described her as small, dignified, always dressed in black, with her silver hair pinned neatly beneath a veil. She would speak gently but briefly, then excuse herself to walk the house, her gloved hand brushing the railings, as though feeling their pulse. She seemed at peace with the strangeness of her life. In her later years, Sarah often sat on her veranda, watching the sunset fade into violet shadows across the orchards. Neighbors sometimes heard her humming, the same soft tune she once played on piano in New Haven so many years ago. The song lingered on the wind, mingling with the creaks and sighs of the mansion. At night, servants said she would light a single candle and wander the halls alone, stopping to study the patterns in the wood. Some believed she still spoke to her lost husband and child, guiding them through the maze she had built, a house where no soul could ever be trapped, because no room was ever truly finished. Night falls softly over the valley. The house exhales. The last workmen have gone home, and only the chirp of crickets and the faint hum of the wind move through the gardens. Somewhere inside the maze of rooms, a single bell tolls 12. Sarah Winchester moves slowly down a narrow corridor, candle in hand. The flame trembles as she passes mirrors and windows that look upon more mirrors and more windows. She stops before a small secret door, her séance room. It has but one entrance and 3 exits, each leading somewhere different, so that any spirit who followed might lose its way. Inside, the walls are paneled in polished wood, the air thick with the scent of wax and lavender. A small round table sits in the center, holding a brass bell, a speaking trumpet, and a shallow bowl of water that reflects the candlelight like liquid gold. Sarah sets the candle down and closes her eyes. She whispers. Sometimes it is the name of her daughter, Annie. Sometimes it is William. Sometimes it has no name at all, only a question sent into the unseen. Am I forgiven yet? No one ever heard the replies, but workers would later say that when the bell rang at 2 a.m, the widow would emerge, pale but calm, carrying new sketches for rooms yet to be built. Somehow, the spirits always had new ideas. By 1910, the mansion had grown to over 160 rooms with 47 fireplaces, 13 bathrooms, 10,000 windows, and 2,000 doors. It was an architectural riddle, a living labyrinth, part dream, part confession. Guests who were invited to stay, rare though they were, often became lost for hours, laughing nervously as they turned a corner that brought them back to where they began. But for Sarah, the maze was home. She had grown old within its wooden veins, her hair silver, her hands delicate and spotted with time. Each morning she rode in her carriage through the orchards, nodding politely to townsfolk who whispered stories about the haunted lady. Each evening she returned to her house of constant motion. And yet, beneath the legend, there was tenderness. She loved her servants, paid them well, and remembered their birthdays. She kept gardens filled with roses, daffodils, and fruit trees whose scent drifted through the open windows. Children from the town would sometimes leave small flowers by her gate, and she would send baskets of pears in return. To those who truly knew her, Sarah Winchester was not a madwoman, but a gentle soul searching for peace in her own peculiar way. The spirits she built for might have been real, or they might have been her grief given shape. Either way, the building was her prayer. As the years pressed on, her steps grew slower, her nights longer. The work never ceased. Even when she could no longer climb the stairs, she ordered ramps to be built so she could still tour her creation. Every creak of the floorboard, every sigh of the wind through the eaves felt to her like conversation. It was a spring evening in 1922 when the hammers fell silent. For the first time in 38 years, no carpenter worked through the night. The widow had gone to her room after midnight, leaving instructions for a new design to begin the next day. A sunroom filled with stained glass shaped like spiderwebs, her favorite motif of protection. But before dawn, she passed away quietly in her sleep. The candle at her bedside had burned down to nothing. When word spread, the workers stopped their tools and set them down where they stood. One by one, they walked out of the house, leaving nails half-driven and boards half-cut. The mansion froze in the middle of its breath. Sarah Winchester was gone. She was 82 years old. In her will, a document written in flowing, steady handwriting, she left her fortune to distant relatives and to charity. The house, however, she left to no one in particular. It was soon sold, and the new owners discovered what she had built. A home with miles of hallways, secret passages, staircases that met the ceiling, doors that opened into thin air, and windows set in the floor. They counted 13 bathrooms, 13 hooks in some closets, and chandeliers modified to hold 13 candles. Everywhere, the number reappeared, her quiet superstition woven into the wood itself. Reporters swarmed to see it. They called it the Winchester Mystery House. They said it was haunted, cursed, or enchanted, depending on the headline. And perhaps, in its own way, it was. Today, if you walk those halls, you can feel it. The hush of history layered over grief and wonder. The sunlight glows through colored glass that Sarah ordered but never saw installed. The stairways creak beneath your feet, whispering of all the hands that built them. If you listen closely, you might hear the faint echo of a piano drifting through the air like a lullaby from long ago. No one knows if Sarah Winchester ever found peace, but her house seems alive, breathing, waiting, still listening. Maybe she never stopped building because she knew that endings are illusions. That life, like her mansion, is a corridor that turns back on itself, leading us again and again to love, to loss, and to mystery. So if ever you visit the great house in San Jose, and the night wind moves through its empty halls, think of the woman who dreamed it into being. A widow who carried her sorrow not in silence, but in architecture, shaping her grief into something vast enough for the spirits and the living to share. And as the stars settle over the valley, and the house sighs once more, let yourself rest in her story. The hammers are quiet now. The candle has gone out. But the dream, the endless, whispering dream, still stands. The mysteries behind the building of Stonehenge. The night is quiet on Salisbury Plain. The wind moves softly through the tall grass, brushing against the earth like a whisper from another age. And there, rising from the mist, are the stones. They stand tall and solemn under a pale moon, gray sentinels guarding secrets 5,000 years old. Each stone has its own weight, its scars, and its own story. Together they form a circle of silence, a crown upon the land. For as long as anyone can remember, people have come here to stare and to wonder. Who built this circle? How did they move such impossible stones across hills, rivers, and time itself? And perhaps, most of all, why? The breath of the earth. Long before cities or kings, before pyramids or iron, this land was already sacred. Thousands of years ago, the people of Britain looked out across the plains and saw the sky as a map and the earth as a living being. They read the seasons through the flight of birds, the rise of the moon, and the length of the shadows in the grass. To them, the world was not separate from spirit, it was spirit. Every river had a memory. Every stone had a soul. When they first gathered here, around 3100 BC, there were no stones yet. Only a great circular ditch cut into the chalk, gleaming white beneath the sun. It was a vast ring in the earth, 6,000 feet around, shaped by hundreds of hands. Inside that circle were 56 shallow pits, what we now call the Aubrey Holes. No one knows exactly what they were for. Perhaps they held wooden posts that framed the sky. Perhaps they marked the turning of the stars. Or perhaps they were graves, resting places for those who had gone to the spirit world. When the people gathered there, they might have carried torches, their flickering flames reflecting off the chalk walls. The air would have smelled of wood smoke, sweat, and rain. Children would have watched in awe as the elders chanted, their voices carried on the wind. This was the beginning of Stonehenge, an idea born from earth and sky. The coming of the stones centuries passed. The world around them changed. Forests grew thick and dark, filled with deer and wild boar. Tribes moved across the land, trading flint, food, and stories. And still, the people returned to the circle on the plain. Then one day, something new began. They decided to raise stones. The first were the blue stones. Hard, smooth stones with a faint blue shimmer when wet. They were unlike anything found nearby. Their home was far away, in the Preseli Hills of Wales, nearly 200 miles distant. To move even one of them would have been a feat beyond imagining. Some say they dragged them over land, using ropes woven from plant fibers and sledges carved from oak. Others think they floated them along rivers, lashed to wooden rafts that creaked and groaned under the weight. Perhaps they did both, pulling, pushings, and praying. It must have taken years, whole lifetimes maybe. Children who watched the stones arrive might have grown old before the circle was complete. And yet, they did it. They brought each one here to this open plain, shaping them, arranging them, and setting them upright in rings and ovals, whose purpose no one alive today can say for certain. Perhaps they believed the stones themselves had power. Perhaps the journey was part the ritual, that to move the stones was to move the world. The Sarsens later came the giants, the Sarsen stones. These were massive slabs of sandstone, each weighing 20 to 30 tons. They came from the Marlborough Downs, 20 miles to the north. To move them, hundreds of people would have worked together, guided by drums and shouted rhythm. Archaeologists believe they may have used wooden rollers and ropes, and even dug shallow tracks into the earth to slide them along. But when you stand beneath those stones today, you can feel it. This was no mere engineering project. It was devotion. They carved the tops of the Sarsens flat and laid other stone across them like bridges, fitting them together with precise joints, tongue and groove, like carpenters working in wood. No metal tools, no cranes, no written plans. Only will, patience, and something deeper, a vision shared across generations. When the last lintel was lifted into place, Stonehenge took the shape we recognize today. A ring within a ring, a monument of light and shadow, standing where the sky meets the plain. The sky's cathedral. Many believe Stonehenge was built to mark the sun, and if you stand there on midsummer's dawn, you can see why. As the first light touches the horizon, the sun rises in perfect alignment with the heelstone, standing just outside the main circle. Its rays stretch through the entrance like fingers of gold, reaching all the way to the heart of the stones. On that day, thousands of years ago, people would have gathered to watch. Their faces turned toward the light, their voices lifted in song. Fires might have burned all night, and when the first beam broke over the horizon, silence would have fallen across the crowd. A silence filled not with emptiness, but with awe. To these people, the sun was life. Its return each summer was a promise renewed. Stonehenge, they believed, might have been the place where earth and sky met, where the human world could touch the divine. A place for the dead and for the living. Long before the Sarsens were raised, the plain around Stonehenge had already become a resting place for the dead. Archaeologists have found dozens of cremated remains buried in and around the ring. Men, women, and even children. Some show signs of careful preparation, of ceremony and care. It was not death alone that brought them here. It was remembrance. Nearby, at Durrington Walls, traces of a great settlement have been found. Wooden houses, pottery, tools, animal bones, all signs of a bustling community. Some believe the people who built Stonehenge lived there. Others think it was a festival site, a place of gathering before great rituals on the plain. Between Durrington Walls and Stonehenge runs an ancient avenue carved into the earth. It leads to the river Avon, as if guiding souls from water to stone, from the world of the living to the world of the dead. Many archaeologists think that Durrington represented life and celebration, while Stonehenge represented eternity and the ancestors. Together, they formed a bridge across existence, the healing circle. Another theory says Stonehenge was a place of healing. The blue stones, said to come from mountains in Wales known for sacred springs, were thought to carry the power of health and renewal. Bones found near the site show signs of injury and disease, people who may have journeyed from far away seeking a cure. Perhaps they believed that standing within the circle could draw away pain, or that touching the stones could restore strength. Imagine the scene. A man limping from miles away, his arm bound in cloth, his face lined with exhaustion. He arrives beneath the towering stones as the sun sets red in the west. Priests, if that's what they were, chant softly in the gathering dusk. He kneels, places his hand upon the cool stone, and whispers his hope into the silence. Did it work? We'll never know. But even now, many visitors speak of a strange calm in the air, a sense that the place itself is alive. The stones of memory. Some scholars believe Stonehenge was a great library, a place to remember. Not in words or books, but through stone and pattern. In cultures without writing, memory was sacred. Stories, histories, laws, and rituals were passed down through song and ceremony. The layout of the stones may have served as a kind of memory system, a way to store knowledge across generations. Each stone could have represented an ancestor, a story, or a season. Walking the circle might have been a way of recalling the world's order, rehearsing the myths that bound their society together. To forget the pattern would be to lose their place in time. So Stonehenge may not only mark where they gathered, but also how they remembered who they were. Echoes of sound. There is another mystery, more subtle yet equally haunting. If you stand within the stones and speak, your voice changes. It deepens. It carries. Sound lingers, bouncing from one slab to another. Some researchers believe this was deliberate. that the builders understood how sound moved through stone and space. They might have used it during rituals, creating echoes that made their chants seem otherworldly, as if the gods themselves were answering. The circle may have been made for sound as well as sight, an earth instrument tuned to the sky. Legends through time. As centuries passed, Stonehenge slipped into legend. When the Romans came, they wondered who had built it. When medieval monks walked its fields, they said it was the work of giants, or of Merlin, the wizard who moved mountains. The Druids of later ages claimed it as their temple, a place of ancient power. Even poets of the 18th and 19th centuries stood before it in awe, calling it a temple of the winds, a clock of the heavens, and a memory of man's first faith. Everyone who saw it left with the same feeling, a quiet stirring of something older than words. The science and the secrets. In modern times, archaeologists have peeled back layers of soil and time, revealing how vast the Stonehenge landscape truly is. Using ground-penetrating radar and laser scanning, they've discovered hidden ditches, burial mounds, and wooden circles buried beneath fields of grass. It turns out Stonehenge is only one piece of a sprawling network of sacred sites stretching for miles. They've traced the chemical fingerprints of the stones, proving that the Sarsens came from a single ridge of land 20 miles north. They've mapped ancient roads leading toward the monument, suggesting planned routes for festivals or processions. They've even found animal bones near Durrington walls that came from as far away as Scotland, evidence that people traveled enormous distances to be part of whatever Stonehenge once was. And still, the final answers elude us. For every discovery, a dozen new questions arise. It's as if the stones themselves are playing a game of silence, allowing us to see just enough to keep us wondering. The builder's world. The people who built Stonehenge lived lives that were simple on the surface, but full of meaning. They hunted, farmed, and fished. They built homes of timber and thatch, and painted their pottery with spirals and lines that echoed the shapes of stars. They carved tiny figurines from bone and stone, perhaps gods, perhaps ancestors. They raised children who grew to work beside them, and who learned to read the land and the seasons. In the evenings, they would have gathered by the fire, telling stories while the night wind whistled through the plains. Maybe they looked toward the dark horizon, where Stonehenge stood, and saw it glowing faintly in the moonlight. To them, it must have felt eternal, a bond between their world and something greater. Seasons of the stones. If you visit Stonehenge in the summer, the air hums with warmth and the buzzing of bees. Ease, the stones seem almost gently standing, bathed in golden light. In winter, it's different. The wind cuts cold across the plain, and the stones turn black against the snow. In the deep silence of January, they feel alive, as if breathing frost. Imagine those ancient people standing. They are present in each season, watching, listening, and waiting. The circle may have been their calendar, their compass, their altar, and their memory. I have been their calendar, their compass, their altar, their memory. It was never just one thing. It was everything. The silence of the ages. Time has eroded much, but not the feeling. When you stand among the stones today, the world seems to fall away. The hum of cars fades away, and the chatter of tourists becomes quiet. Tourists grow quiet. Of tourists grows quiet. You feel the weight of centuries pressing gently on your shoulders. Each stone holds the warmth of the sun by day, and the cool breath of stars by night. Each one has witnessed births, deaths, storms, and solstices beyond counting. It is said that those who listen closely can still hear the echo of drums, the murmur of voices carried on the wind. Perhaps that is only imagination. Or perhaps imagination is exactly what the builders hoped to awaken. The meaning of mystery. We live in an age of answers. We like explanations, diagrams, and proofs. But Stonehenge resists all that. It is not meant to be solved. It is meant to be felt. It reminds us that mystery has its own power, that sometimes not knowing is what keeps wonder alive. And in that way, the people who built Stonehenge succeeded. Their monument still makes us pause, still makes us look up at the sky and ask questions older than history. Epilogue: the stones remain. The wind moves again across Salisbury Plain. The grass bends low, the air smells of rain, and the stones stand unmoved. They have outlasted the kings of Britain, the rise and fall of Rome, the birth of nations, and the reach of machines in the sky. They will likely outlast us too, and that perhaps is their greatest mystery. They were built to last, not because the builders thought they could conquer time, but because they wanted to be part of it. They wanted to say, we were here. We looked at the sun. We built something that would remember us when we were gone. So when you next see a picture of Stonehenge, or if you ever stand upon that ancient plain, close your eyes. Hear the wind. Feel the ground beneath your feet. And imagine the hands that placed each stone, the hearts that dreamed it, and the lives that passed beneath the same sky you stand under now. The stones are not silent. They are singing in the language of time. The stones remain. We listen